It all started with a notification. If you're familiar with Steam notifications, they're pretty unobtrusive, and I assumed that this one had sat in the top corner of my Steam page for several days before I noticed it. But as soon as I did, there was no going back. You see, this notification was from a Steam discussion post that I had made in 2013. Someone had left a comment on a post over a decade old about a game, an MMORPG called Pandora Saga, which didn't even exist anymore. The commenter had left what seemed like a copy-pasted message, or more like a sales pitch for a fan-made recreation of Pandora Saga. As they put it, it was made by players for players. Now, I don't know if I would consider myself a player. I had probably played about 10 hours of the MMO back in 2013, and more than actually remembering the game, I mainly remembered that I had tried to make Let's Play videos using a camcorder that I pointed at my screen because things like fraps back then were too expensive. I was literally 13 years old. I couldn't afford anything. Sadly, the channel with those videos doesn't exist anymore, but believe me, I tried looking so hard because I feast on the cringe of my younger self. But alas, it could not be found, so doesn't really matter. What immediately intrigued me was the link in the comment leading to a Russian website. As someone intimately familiar with the internet, I've seen my fair share of sketchy sites, and this one was ringing a few alarm bells. So for basic internet safety, I decided to do just a little bit of research before actually clicking that link. And that's when the full picture began to come together. From what I can understand, Pandora Saga shut down in around 2014, basically within a year of the time that I had briefly played it. And then, at some point, a group of Russian fans came together and remade the game from the ground up, I think. Now, I was intrigued. I've covered projects like this in the past where fans came together to preserve something that they love, like Cartoon Network's Fusion Fall or Pirates of the Caribbean Online. You can find my videos up here in the corner probably. I'm always one for a little nostalgia tripping, but what was unique in this case is that I'm not really nostalgic for this game at all. In fact, I hardly remember the slightest details about it. So, instead of the potential of being blinded by rose-colored glasses, I could take a look at this MMO for exactly what it was. With the research done, I was a little bit more trusting of the strange.ru link, and I decided to delve in. Now, the website was entirely in Russian, but thankfully Google Chrome does have a built-in Google Translate feature, so that made my life a little bit easier. This is Andy interjecting later while editing, and I just realized that the text on the front page in English is exactly what was commented on my old post, so that explains where that text came from. And even better for me, the game actually had a full English patch, which I will definitely be talking more about later, but signing up and getting the game for now was surprisingly easy, so I really appreciated that. And from there, we were off. Let's go play on a Russian MMO server. Now, before I fully dive in, what the hell even is Pandora Saga, you might be asking yourself? Well, here's a brief lore dump for you. Now, I actually had a really hard time tracking down when the game came out. The Google AI thing told me 2007, but I'm definitely not trusting that for a number of reasons. But from what I can figure looking at reviews for the game, as well as a news alert that is still available on Steam, the game came out in 2011 or 2012. There is a Pandora Saga wiki, but it's an important thing to note that those fandom wiki sites are not always the most trustworthy places on the internet, and there are no sources cited for any of the info there. The Steam alert saying the game was quote-unquote now available and free to play was dated in March 2012, so it's best to assume that the game came out somewhere near there. The game was interesting for a number of reasons. Specifically, it had an emphasis on large-scale PvP battles, literally 300-player massive PvP battles between 3 warring kingdoms. Now, I have no clue how well those actually worked in practice, and from what I saw, there certainly weren't enough players on the Russian server to try those out, so I was kind of limited to my single-player liminal experience, because for most of the time playing this game, there was not anyone around. Literally, for like 90% of my time I spent in this game, I saw maybe one person. And I actually still don't know if that person was even real. In terms of the game's story, basically what I can gather is that the world was a peaceful and unified kingdom under one king, but then there was this event called the Great Catastrophe that splintered the world, and 3 rival nations rose up, each seeking an ancient artifact called Pandora, because according to a prophecy, whoever controls Pandora controls the world. It's basically the stick of truth from that one South Park game. And that's really it. Our role in this world is to join a kingdom and fight to claim the Pandora. I had to gather all this info from a few different places because, well, as you'll soon see, the English translation in this game is not great, and sometimes it doesn't even work at all. But with that, I think it's finally time for us to log on to the Russian server and see how things are. As is the way with any good MMORPG, we first had to make our character. Pandora Saga offers a fair bit in terms of races and classes, but not as much in terms of actual character customization. For races, you have classics like human, elf, and dwarf, and then there are a few unique races like small bunny guy, tall booby lady, and Chad. I wrote those names into the script as placeholders, but I actually forgot their names, so that's what they're going to be. For classes, there are less options, but I do remember, and the untrustworthy wiki backed me up on this, that each class has several other classes that they can become as you level. When making your character, you get to pick between Acolyte, Mage, Scout, and Warrior, 4 classes that kind of fill the broad MMORPG classes that you'd look for: Healer, Magic DPS, Ranged/Melee DPS, and Tank. As you level those 4 classes, they can become Priests, Archers, Paladins, Warlocks, lots of options. I think there are around 16 classes at the end of the game, which is honestly kinda sick. I decided to make an Elf Scout. I know, it's incredibly basic of me, but it seemed the most enjoyable. Plus, and you can quote me on this, bows are the coolest weapon in fantasy. There's just something so cool about sniping someone with an arrow. Unlike in other fantasy media, though, elves in Pandora Saga are on the shorter side. Not quite Keebler Elf or Santa Elf short, but more like teenager-esque than the tall and fair folk that you might see in other fantasy media. As soon as I finished making my character and logging into the game, something was off. Well, aside from the fact that the game immediately crashed and I actually had to make my character a second time. I remembered very little about the game from when I played it, but I did remember that you start the game in a city. But instead, I was now in some sort of base camp in a wooded area. The hardest part about the whole process of playing this game was that I could never look anything up. Much of the talk about this version of the game was in Russian, and the community wasn't big enough for there to be any major guides or anything, so I was kind of just flying by the seat of my pants into uncharted waters here. My best guess is that this different area was a new tutorial area that was added to the game when it was rebuilt. And that's cool. I'm okay with a little change, and it actually gave me a goal to work towards. I want to find the area that I remember from the game. I am nostalgia tripping once again in the loosest of terms, but now that's my goal. Right away, I had some problems, and by some I actually mean a lot. To start, as I mentioned before, the translation is really not great. I do want to say that I really appreciate that the option exists though, especially for those who may have been more invested in the game than I ever was. And the translation is good enough to get you where you need to be. Most of the time. The issue, and this is a big issue, is that the English translation is only in dialogue and weapon and skill descriptions. All names, and more importantly for me, the quest log is still entirely in Russian. For the former, the issue is that the dialogue would refer to characters by a name in English, but then all of the floaty names above people's heads were in Russian. It caused some initial confusion, but it became easier to figure out as I went on. I started connecting my understanding of a name with the Russian name. It actually was kind of a cool experience. Almost like that game Chance of Senar where you have to decipher languages, but it's somewhat more of a real application. In terms of the quest log though, that got in the way a lot more. If I forgot my task, I had little to no way of deciphering what I was supposed to be doing. So there was a lot, and I mean a lot, of running around trying to figure things out. Quests where I needed to kill a certain number of enemies of a certain kind were especially brutal. But before I get too deep into that, let's talk about the game itself. Pandora Saga plays similar to a lot of other MMOs from around that time, with standard combat, albeit a more archaic form, more similar to WoW Classic than modern WoW if you know what I mean. The game starts you off with combat right away, having you kill 3 training dummies, which I will admit took me far longer than it should have to figure out after I had some issues. Also, the training dummies were just incredibly tanky against my little dagger, but we made it work. This is also where I noticed something a little bit annoying that surely won't become extremely annoying in an hour or two. The game's music. So far, there are 2 songs in the game, and they are constantly playing on loop. The only way to switch songs is to sheath or unsheath your weapon. The moment you do that, one song stops and the other one starts playing from the top. Needless to say, this becomes mind-numbing if you play the game for any length of time. After vanquishing the mighty training dummies, we're introduced to some more of the basics of the world. We have to kill a few ants, typical MMO fodder, and it really wasn't too hard. I was planning to play the game with a bow, but I still only had a knife for now. Thankfully, after this quest I was actually able to go buy some new equipment, including my very own bow. The game actually has a pretty cool weapon system involving gems, which give weapons different elemental powers. For my first weapon, I bought a bow, of course. I enchanted it with the power of fire. Pretty sick if I do say so myself. You could swap out your elements at any time and apply new ones as you go, and I do actually really appreciate that level of customization with weaponry. It reminds me of this old Flash RPG I played as a kid called Arcas. I love being able to switch up elements to my playstyle, and I imagine in PvP it adds an extra layer of strategy too, which is always good. With my new weapon in hand, I then set off to kill some cobras, and here I encounter 2 major issues. First, and arguably the more important issue, I tried to attack with my new bow, and I had no arrows. It was definitely my fault. I should have realized that I would actually have to buy ammo. I don't mind games that have an ammo requirement. What I do mind, though, is actually being able to find where I can buy a damn arrow. I tell you, I searched high and low for those damn things. I assumed the weapon seller would have them, and I looked item by item to make sure I wasn't missing something. But nope, nothing. Zip. After searching the base camp for about 20 minutes, I finally found them. They were being sold by a consumables vendor in the tavern area, which, I guess they are consumables in that you shoot them and they go away permanently, but I would never think that they would be sold there. To me, a consumable vendor would sell potions and foods, which they also had, but also arrows and bolts for some reason. I think this may come down to another mistranslation somewhere, but I'm not totally sure. With arrows finally in hand, I could then take on the cobras, but here's where that other issue came into play. There were 2 different snakes in the area that looked nearly identical, and their names were in Russian that looked similar enough to make telling them apart hard. So, I did what I do best. I started killing everything in sight to make sure I killed the right snakes, and eventually, and weirdly enough, I actually had to kill both kinds of snakes. I later learned that they were called king cobras and baby cobras, but annoyingly, the quest objective to kill baby cobras didn't unlock until I killed enough king cobras. A true nightmare on my brain as I tried to understand what I was actually doing in this game. Again, I don't want to fault the devs behind the game, because one thing is abundantly clear about this project, just from the get-go. A lot of love and care has gone into remaking this game. And I don't know this for sure, but from the impression that I get, they built this game from the ground up, and that is some seriously impressive stuff to be applauded. That being said, my journey was a bit harder than it needed to be. With the first few killing quests out of the way, the tutorial introduced me to crafting professions, specifically mining, tailoring, and herbology? I actually can't remember the third one, but it's not important because I decided to go with tailoring/hunting because it seemed to fit my scout class. And in order to fully learn the skill, I then had to go collect some pelts from goats that were spread around the area. Now, you might assume that you would need to kill goats and use a knife or something to get the pelt, and you would be sort of right. In order to skin a goat, you do have to kill it, but only with a pickaxe. I thought this was a translation error at first, but no, we actually have to go mine goats. I'm not sure where the idea came from. In fact, the goats around here cannot be damaged unless you have a pickaxe equipped to mine that sucker. Maybe it's a Russian thing. I don't know. I've decided that questioning certain design choices will just bog down my experience, so let's just prepare for the absurd. After eventually mining those goats, I was rewarded with a ticket for my very own horse. Now, I should also mention, upon starting this game, I assumed getting a horse would take a while, because it said that you can't get a mount until level 20. But what I didn't know is that this game levels you up at the speed of a bullet train running 5 minutes behind during rush hour. I was level 20 with under an hour of playtime. I'm really not sure why, because I definitely remember leveling taking a lot longer back in the day. And you would think, oh, you're high level, so you must be overpowered. But au contraire, the zone directly outside the base camp, for some inexplicable reason, has enemies in the level 50 range, and I cannot tell you who thought that was a good idea. I learned that the hard way when I was just killing some mice for a quest, and I accidentally attacked one that was identical to the others, but it roundhouse kicked me and knocked me dead in one hit. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It's time for my mount. After getting that ticket to buy a horse, I then had to actually find out where to buy a horse. In a way that was very reminiscent of older MMOs, I had absolutely no fucking clue where to trade the coupon. So I just ran around everywhere until eventually I found the stable, which was sitting right next to one of the city exits. I traded the coupon and got my horse, who I named Jeff, spelled with a G, of course. Now, I was immediately confused by how horses work in this game. In a vast majority of MMOs, you can summon and dismiss your horse whenever you want. It makes traveling easier, and with the insane amount of back and forth in this game, it would have been a huge time saver. But that is not how this game works at all, as far as I can figure. The only way to mount your horse is by talking to a stable master, and then you have a skill on your skill bar by default that allows you to dismount. There is absolutely no way to remount after that, which certainly caused some annoyance for me as I started riding further away from the stables for quests, only to have to slowly run all the way back to the base camp afterwards. It's a massive time sink. It also just occurred to me that so far, this game has been completely streamlined. There have been no side quests or anything. I'm just following the main plot all the way through, and while I don't mind that, I do tend to like a bit of open worldness in my MMOs. For now, I figured it was just a symptom of me still being in the tutorial, but due to the fact that I was already past level 20, I don't know if you can even call this a tutorial anymore. After getting my horse, it was time for a few long rides, much longer than I would have ever expected. I was sent to help gather some special herbs needed for potion making, and this time I was tasked to actually use a little bit of brain power to locate what I was looking for. Up until this point, every quest had given me a map marker of where to go. This time I had to rely fully on my quest log, which I will remind you is fully in Russian, to find those herbs. The issue is that in the actual game dialogue, which was in English, the cutesy herb lady never actually said where to go. But in the quest log, I saw a bracketed K8, which I took to mean go to square K8 on the map, because thankfully the map does have a grid system like that. So, I went there. Now from the herb lady, K8 was on the exact opposite side of the map, like literally as far as I could go. So thankfully I had a horse. As I traveled across the map, I learned that Pandora Saga horses went to the same school as Skyrim horses, which allow them to climb up sheer cliffs, or in this case, pillars. I just accidentally ran into this pillar and I levitated to the top of it. I have no clue why. I wonder if I had just glitched out of bounds, but it was only the pillar and I fell right down upon moving. So, glitchy pillars behind me, I rode on to square K8, and I faced a little bit of difficulty, something I really don't understand from a questing perspective. I was around level 23 at this point, and for some absolutely fucking insane reason, the entire area where I needed to go was level 50 plus enemies who would one-shot me. Now, I bumped into those lone high-level enemies earlier, and it was weird, but this was just dumb, and actually made me rethink my entire quest, since I had no clue what the rest of the text said. I was thinking to myself, is that K8 also in Russian? I very much don't speak Russian, and I can't read a Cyrillic alphabet, so I looked it up, and the Russian K looks basically the same as in the Latin alphabet. So there wasn't any understanding problem here. The only thing I didn't understand is why would a quest send me into the fucking lion's den? It was here that I broke out Google Translate, because I had to know. And while I'm sure it wasn't a perfect translation, it helped me to understand a little better. Basically, I had to go to a field of herbs in Square K8, and according to the herb lady, I would know it when I see it. So, I searched, and I searched, and I searched, and I searched, and I died several times, losing XP, which is a feature of this game, and I had to run back again and again. I want you all to pay special attention to this field of blue flowers here. The only thing of note in the K8 square. Also, make note of the level 50 skeleton warrior standing right on top of them. Because, truthfully, what the hell? I walked over the flowers several times because they obviously had to be the special herbs. They had to be. But there was nothing to loot there. And every time I got near them, I would aggro the evil Skelly Man, risking another death. I searched for probably an hour, and nothing. Not a damn thing. I was legit gonna call it quits here, say I'd seen enough of this game and just make my video as was, but then I would fail my goal of seeing the area that I had seen as a kid. So, after rage quitting for a little while, I decided I had to come back and try once again, for my honor. I respawned back in base camp after getting murked by a random enemy, and I rode back to the dreaded K8. And I noticed there wasn't a damn skeleton in there. It was gone. There were literally no skeletons in that area anymore. I don't know what happened. I walked over to the blue flowers, and immediately it started a cutscene where I got ambushed by a bunch of guys, apparently trying to stop me from getting the herbs. Now, I have no clue if I did anything wrong the first time, but for some reason the quest decided to work now, meaning I could actually continue the story, maybe actually reach my goal. But that's still a ways off, I think. I headed back to the herb girl and gave her the, well, herbs, and she rewarded me with some potions and told me to go back to the soldiers at base camp and tell them what had happened to me. So I did, and I was actually given a pretty decent reward. I got the ability to upgrade my class. I talked to someone who I assume is a magician for reasons I will get into in a moment. In order to upgrade from Scout, I had to prove myself by killing some ants and collecting some crystals. And in a note that worried me, the magician man told me that I needed to find the ants myself as part of the test. No map markers allowed. And after the last quest, I was fairly worried. Thankfully, I remembered exactly where the ants were because they were some of the first enemies I had to kill in the game. So, I killed a lot of ants. Because not every ant dropped the crystal, so I had to just keep killing until finally, once I had enough, I got a pop-up on my screen that simply said, "Inform of this to the mentor of the magicians." Beautiful. It was poetry, really. So that's why I assume he is a magician, because surely a magician must be the one to mentor other magicians. But a magician I am not, and an archer I will soon be. Upon returning to the mentor of the magicians, I gave them the crystals, and they let me pick my class, between Archer and Provocateur. Since I was focused on archery, I went with the former, although I believe the much cooler sounding Provocateur can become a rogue or assassin later, which is kinda sick as hell. Switching classes didn't really make much of a difference. It unlocked a few new skills and gave me a slight boost to my ranged and evasion stats, but that's about it. By this point, I was around level 35, and still in the game's tutorial, I think. So, when the hell does this tutorial actually end? I mentioned earlier I have very few memories about how this game was when I was a kid, but I definitely remember struggling to ever reach level 20 because that was the level you got a mount, and I never even got one. But here I am, just about 5 hours into this game, time inflated of course by the hours I spent searching for a broken quest objective, and I'm already level 35. So, I have a theory, and this could be wrong, and I have no way to Google this because this info is literally nowhere. But I think the whole point of this fan remake is to rush you to endgame so you can play the game's PvP content. That's the only conceivable reason I can think of. The problem is, this fast leveling has unintended side effects, like the fact that there are, for some reason, no upgraded weapons between level 14 and 45. There is also the fact that I don't like endgame content. I never have. The only time I have ever really been into endgame MMO content was in World of Warcraft during the Pandaria expansion, where I would farm daily for mounts on the Timeless Isles, or in Elder Scrolls Online where I was questing for a rare mount. See, mounts are a huge incentive for me, and this game doesn't have the mount draw at endgame. So, after changing classes, I was sent to investigate the threat of the people who ambushed me while I gathered herbs, and I had to kill a few spiders. But you'll see that as I begin fighting these ambusher guys, I do practically no damage. One NPC suggested that I upgrade my weapon before taking them on, and so I tried. Thankfully, there was a weapon merchant next to me who sold amazing-looking silver weapons. The weapons were all level 45, and I was around level 36 at this point. I went back to the OG weapon vendor, and I already had his strongest weapon, a short bow, which was level 14. So yeah, huge gap and no one else to upgrade from because I was stuck in the tutorial zone. There was another issue too. The silver bow cost 100,000 game currency. In my entire time playing, I had only gotten about 20k. So yeah, I really had no way to upgrade at all. So what followed was me very slowly, very methodically taking out enemies for a long time. It took forever. I died several more times because if I accidentally pulled a second enemy, I was screwed. But eventually I managed it. I did it. I refused to give up after already coming so close. After taking out the troops, I got another quest to take out their leader, and now I was level 45 because you seriously get 5 to 10 levels for every quest you complete, which is insane, but I digress. I still didn't have enough money for a better bow, so I was stuck with my low-level short bow. I very slowly took out the bandit boss, which was one of those big guys, the first I've actually seen in this entire game, I think. I still don't remember their race's name, and honestly, I'm too scared to look it up. But once again, I did it. And what was my reward for beating the bandit boss? I was able to change classes again. It was like 4 quests since I last upgraded, and this basically 100% confirms my belief that this game is only around for the end game. So, I upgraded from Archer to Sniper, which gave me a cool new ability that rooted my character but gave me longer range and more damage while standing still. I like abilities like this, with obvious drawbacks but a big payoff. It's funny, now that I think about it, the style of this game reminds me of what happened with Destiny 2. I played Destiny 2 briefly when it first came out and I enjoyed it, but again, I was there to play the game's story and maybe just a little bit of the dungeon stuff. No interest in endgame PvP or anything. Years later, I picked up the game again and I wanted to make a new character and play through the story, but I couldn't because they had vaulted all the content, in what I can only assume was an effort to streamline the game both in terms of file size and to get players to endgame faster. Needless to say, I was annoyed and I never played the game again, but that's all a rant for another day. I came into this MMO hoping to at least relive what I had played as a kid, and this Russian server seems to have skipped all of it in favor of getting people to endgame, an endgame that I have no connection with and no reason to play. So, needless to say, this was really not for me. But I kept playing a little while longer because I had to know what was beyond this tutorial area. Thankfully, I was there. After the bandit leader was taken care of, I was allowed to be teleported to this central city, and as the intro cutscene to the city played, it all came flooding back to me. This was the place I remember from when I was younger. This was where I started the game all those years ago. And even better yet, I could actually see other players, tons of them populating this city. Finally, I could see what other people were up to in this game. But when I actually spawned in, I was in for a rude awakening. The city was dead. Not dead as in there was no one there. Dead as in nothing was happening. The world chat was stagnant, not a single message, and probably 100 people were all stacked, standing, unmoving in the city square, many of them looking like they were trading goods or selling items. But not a single message was shared. It reminded me a lot of those Team Fortress 2 servers that I spent a lot of time on growing up, those idle servers where people just leave their computer running so they get item drops, or where I would go to farm easy kills for my weapon counters. It's a weird and sad thing to see now, just 100 motionless players all standing around doing nothing. It's honestly scarier than if this place had been empty. It's a telltale sign of what this game is now, and to make things even more clear, as I began moving, a random NPC called out to me, and from what I could get from the English translation, they were inviting me to buy premium currency from the game's website for real money. Now, a lot of MMOs do similar things, so I'm not judging that fully, although I am not a huge fan of microtransactions. But the stagnant trading players with a real money market really paints a picture more akin to the NFT market than it does to a thriving MMO ecosystem. Needless to say, it was worrisome. Before I gave up on playing the game though, there were a few more things I wanted to see. I was immediately intrigued by the first quest I got outside the tutorial, which asked me to go talk to an amnesiac who might know a potion to, quote-unquote, help me relearn my lost abilities. The problem is, I had no lost abilities, at least as far as I could tell. My assumption was that this potion was going to backfire, causing me to forget all my abilities from the tutorial so I could then start the real leveling experience. It sounds dumb, and I admit it was wishful thinking, but it seemed possible. Before doing that quest, though, I decided to check with vendors around the city to see if I could get a better weapon, because for the love of God, I was tired of my pointless level 14 bow. But alas, every vendor only had the same level 45 silver weapons, all for 100,000 money. I don't know the name of this game's currency, so I'm just calling it money. Also, I found a shop that appeared to sell the same weapons for real money, which does not bode well. So, I decided to keep going with the quest, and I met that amnesiac dwarf who sent me to get ingredients for the potion by killing enemies outside the city. And I was expecting a difficult time killing the enemies, but no. All of the enemies outside the city were like level 1 to 5, like you would expect to see outside a game's starting city. I think this further fueled my belief that they might actually restart me at level 1 again. So, I killed some snakes and then some maggots, and finally I had all the needed ingredients for the potion. I returned to the dwarf who brewed me a concoction that started smoking, and I thought, this is it. Finally, I can play the real game. Let's go. But no, the potion just knocked me out and did nothing else, because it turns out the amnesiac mixed it wrong. I then had to talk to a guy just down the road who I don't think I had ever met before, but he seemed to know me for some reason. Again, I think something was lost in translation here, but this guy correctly brewed the potion, which allowed me to regain my lost abilities. And it worked! I got my abilities back. Except I literally hadn't lost any abilities. I scrolled through my skill list multiple times and there was nothing new at all. So I seriously have no clue what the point of this whole quest was. Like, at all. The guy who made the real potion offered to take me somewhere to test out my new skills, so I went with him, and he actually gave me the level 45 silver bow for free. So I guess that is nice, and the game doesn't expect you to get one until now, but it also makes me wonder a few things. 1, why even offer the bow for sale in the tutorial area if you can't possibly afford it? And 2, why sell that extremely expensive bow anywhere if you're going to get it for free during this quest? And 3, did they really plan for you to suffer through the entire tutorial with a shitty weapon? Like seriously, it was miserable at the end. But he gave me the bow for free and told me if I want another silver weapon, I'd have to buy it. But don't worry, I don't plan on playing long enough to afford a second weapon. I used the bow to kill some level 45 tarantulas and to quote-unquote test out my newly relearned skills. Seriously, not a damn clue what skills he was talking about, and that was that. I reached the point where I was content with what I had played with this game. I had made it back to the location I remembered from when I was a kid. I beat the tutorial, and I realized that this server may or may not be a money laundering scheme. I'm really not sure what is up with all those idle players trading in the main plaza. I also learned that this version of the game, and I guess most specifically this server, is not what I thought it would be, and that's okay. If I had to take a guess, this server was made to cater to players who thrived in the end game of the original and wanted to relive those memories, and good for them. I'm glad they have a place where they can congregate now. What all started with a strange Russian link in a decade-old Steam forum post led me to here, and it was certainly a weird journey. For what it was, I had fun playing the game. I loved reading the quirky mistranslations and actively struggling to figure out what I was doing. It kind of made the game almost feel like a puzzle for me to solve, which I don't think was the intended way to play the game, but it made it fun for me at least. And as much as there were problems with the game, and with some of the quests, and there were strange glitches, I admire the work that the devs put in to make this game actually work. And clearly they are very actively updating the game, because nearly every single time I logged in, I had to update the game. So that work and dedication simply can't be understated. If you're looking for a small, very dated MMORPG with an extremely niche community and an apparent dedication to endgame PvP, maybe go check this one out for yourself. You may get more from it than I did. Thank you so much for watching this video. This one kinda came out of nowhere. I was working on a different project when this notification appeared, and I kinda just switched gears right away. I'm still working on my other project, which has been kind of a long time in the making, and I can't wait for that to finally happen. I've also started posting shorts on my YouTube channel every other day, so there are a lot of those if you're looking for more smaller content between my bigger uploads. I'm also planning to maybe start streaming on YouTube in the new year alongside my Twitch streams, so that's something else to look forward to. But I guess this will probably be my last video of the year, so Happy New Year, everyone, and have a good one. I will catch you all on the flip side.